The sun was setting over Coronado Naval Base when two security guards blocked the entrance to the graduation hall. The man in front of them wore a torn jacket that reeked of salt water and concrete dust. His hands, scarred and calloused, trembled as he held up a crumpled invitation with his son's name on it. One guard wrinkled his nose, the other reached for his radio. But before anyone could say another word, the homeless man's sleeve lifted just enough to reveal something that would change everything. A set of coordinates, a faded trident, and a name that every Navy SEAL in that building had heard, whispered like a ghost story. If you're watching this story from anywhere in the world, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. Drop a comment below telling us your city or country, and if stories like this one about courage, sacrifice, and second chances speak to you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more incredible true stories that honor the forgotten heroes among us. Now let's continue. James Colton hadn't slept in a bed for 6 years. He'd slept under bridges, in doorways, on benches until the cops moved him along. His home was a concrete alcove beneath the Coronado Bridge, where the wind cut through at night, and the sound of traffic overhead never stopped. He carried everything he owned in a faded military backpack. A framed photo of his son at 8 years old, smiling with a missing front tooth. A Purple Heart medal wrapped in black cloth that he never showed anyone, and a broken portable radio that had belonged to his best friend, Marcus Reed. Marcus, who died in his arms in Fallujah, while James screamed for a medevac that came too late. James hadn't always been invisible. Once, he was Master Chief James Colton, call sign Reaper, Navy SEAL Team 6, 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, specialist in underwater demolitions and hostile infiltration. He'd led missions that would never be declassified, pulled men out of places they were never supposed to survive, and earned a reputation that made even hardened operators go quiet when his name came up. The only easy day was yesterday. That's what the ink on his forearm said, beneath the GPS coordinates that marked the spot where he'd carried 8 wounded men to safety through 4 kilometers of enemy fire. But he'd left 3 behind, including Marcus. The PTSD came slow, then all at once. Nightmares that made him wake up swinging. Flashbacks triggered by car backfires and fireworks. The VA gave him pills and appointments that never led anywhere. Bureaucracy, paperwork, wait times that stretched into months. He tried to hold on, tried to be a father to Aiden, tried to work construction, tried to function. But the anger came in waves he couldn't control. The guilt was worse. So 6 years ago, James made a decision. He walked away. Told himself Aiden would be better off without a broken father. Told himself it was protection. It wasn't. It was surrender. He lived quietly after that. Never caused trouble. Never stole. He'd help other homeless veterans find shelters or share food when he had any. He kept his head down and tried not to think about what he used to be. But 2 months ago, something changed. He found a crumpled flyer under a bench. A graduation ceremony. Navy SEAL Class 342. And there, in small print at the bottom, a list of names. Aiden Michael Colton. His son. His boy. The kid he hadn't seen in 6 years was about to become what James once was. A SEAL. James walked for 2 days to get to Coronado. 43 miles on foot, sleeping in bus stops, drinking from public fountains. His feet bled through his boots. His ribs ached. But he kept moving. He wasn't going to miss this. He didn't plan to make contact. Didn't plan to embarrass Aiden. He just wanted to see him. One time. Just to know his son had made it. When he arrived at the base, the sun was still high. Families poured through the gates in pressed suits and summer dresses. Mothers clutched flowers. Fathers wore navy ball caps from their own service days. James stood at the edge of the parking lot, trying to gather the courage to walk through those gates. His reflection stared back at him in a car window. Hollow cheeks, matted hair. A beard that hadn't been trimmed in months. He looked like exactly what he was, a man the world had forgotten. He approached the entrance just as the ceremony was about to begin. 2 guards stood at the security checkpoint. Tyler Marks, 28, fresh-faced and by the book. Brent Cole, 31, a little older, a little harder. They saw James coming and exchanged a glance. Tyler stepped forward first. "Sir, do you have identification?" James reached into his jacket and pulled out the invitation. It was wrinkled, stained with something that might have been coffee or mud. Tyler took it, studied it, frowned. "This says guest of Aiden Colton. Are you family?" "I'm his father." Brent stepped closer now, arms crossed. "You got any ID to confirm that?" James hesitated. His driver's license had expired 4 years ago. He had no proof. Nothing but a photo in his backpack and a name that no longer meant anything to anyone. "I don't, but I just want to sit in the back. I won't cause any trouble." Tyler looked at Brent. Brent looked at the line of families forming behind James. Protocol said no ID, no entry. But something in the way the old man stood, something in his eyes, made Tyler pause. "Wait here," Tyler said, and stepped aside to radio command. What Tyler didn't know was that at that exact moment, inside the auditorium, Admiral Catherine Hayes was reviewing the ceremony roster and preparing to deliver a speech about legacy, sacrifice, and what it meant to earn the trident. And the only person standing outside who truly understood those words was a homeless veteran everyone had already written off. Tyler came back a minute later. "All right, you can go in, but you'll need to sit in the back. And sir, we'll need you to keep your belongings with security." James nodded. He handed over his backpack. Brent took it, unzipped it briefly, saw the framed photo, the medal. He zipped it back up without a word and handed James a claim ticket. Tyler opened the gate. "Thank you," James said quietly. He walked through. The auditorium loomed ahead, white and gleaming in the late afternoon sun. He could hear the hum of voices inside, the shuffling of chairs, the distant sound of a brass band warming up. His heart hammered in his chest. He hadn't been on a military base in over a decade. It felt like stepping into a past life. Inside, the auditorium was packed, rows and rows of families. At the front, a stage draped in navy blue and gold. Behind it, the American flag and the Navy SEAL trident emblem. James slipped into the last row, into a shadowed corner near the exit. A few people turned to look at him. A woman in a floral dress wrinkled her nose and whispered something to her husband. A man in a suit shifted his chair a few inches away. James kept his eyes forward. The ceremony began. The brass band played the national anthem. Everyone rose. James stood slowly, his hand over his heart, his lips moving silently to words he hadn't spoken aloud in years. Then Admiral Hayes took the podium. She was 58, with sharp eyes and grey hair pulled into a tight bun. She'd spent 35 years in the Navy and commanded more respect than most flag officers twice her rank. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Today we honor the men who have earned the right to wear the trident. It is not a gift, it is not inherited. It is earned through pain, through fear, through the refusal to quit when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to stop. These men are not superheroes. They are human, but they have chosen to become something more." James listened, his hands clenched in his lap. He knew those words. He'd lived them, bled them, lost friends to them. The roll call began. One by one, the graduates were called to the stage. Each one received their trident from Admiral Hayes. Each one shook her hand, and then the tradition. The question she asked every single graduate, every single time. "Is there a SEAL present who would like to pin this trident?" Usually it was a father, a brother, a mentor, someone who had walked the path before and wanted to pass the torch. James watched as fathers in dress whites stepped forward, as older SEALs with grey beards and chest full of ribbons came up to honor the young men they'd trained. And then the name was called. Aiden Michael Colton. James sat up, his breath caught. And there he was, his son, 23 years old, taller than James remembered, broader in the shoulders. His hair buzzed short, his uniform crisp and perfect. Aiden walked to the stage with his back straight and his eyes forward. Admiral Hayes handed him the trident, a small gold pin that weighed almost nothing but meant everything. "Is there a SEAL present who would like to pin this trident?" The auditorium went quiet. Aiden scanned the crowd. His mother wasn't here. She'd passed 3 years ago from cancer. No uncles, no grandfathers. Just empty seats where family should have been. And then from the back of the room in the shadows where no one had been paying attention, A scarred hand rose slowly into the air. James didn't mean to do it. It was instinct, a father's reflex. But the moment his hand went up, the moment his sleeve slid back and revealed the ink on his forearm, everything stopped. Aiden's eyes found him, and for a moment, the young SEAL's face went completely blank. Then his mouth opened, his eyes filled. And he said, loud enough for the front row to hear, "Admiral, my father is here." Admiral Hayes looked confused. She glanced at her roster. Aiden's father wasn't listed. She looked out into the crowd, following Aiden's gaze to the back of the room. And then she saw him. A homeless man in torn clothing standing in the shadows, his hand still raised. She stepped down from the stage. The room held its breath. Families turned in their seats. Graduates craned their necks. Admiral Hayes walked down the center aisle, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She stopped in front of James, looked him up and down, saw the dirt under his nails, the smell of the streets, the hollow cheeks, and then she saw the tattoo. Her face went white. Her hand flew to her mouth. She took a step back, and for a moment it looked like she might fall. "Reaper," she whispered. James nodded once. "Ma'am." The name spread through the room like wildfire. Reaper. Reaper. The Reaper of Fallujah, the legend, the ghost, the man who wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Admiral Hayes straightened, and then, in front of 200 people, she did something no one expected. She saluted, a full, formal military salute to a man in rags. "Master Chief Colton," she said, her voice shaking. "We didn't know. We didn't know." James returned the salute slowly. His hand trembled. "Permission to approach, Admiral." "Granted." He walked down the aisle. Every eye in the room followed him. Some families leaned away, others stared in shock. But the SEALs, the young graduates, the instructors, they all stood. One by one, they rose to their feet. Aiden jumped off the stage and ran. He didn't walk. He sprinted down the aisle and crashed into his father with the force of 6 years of grief and longing. He wrapped his arms around James and buried his face in his father's shoulder, and he sobbed like a child. "Dad, Dad, I thought you were dead. I thought I'd lost you." James held him. His hands, rough and broken, cradled his son's head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Aiden. I thought you'd be better without me. I was never better without you." Behind them, Admiral Hayes was wiping her eyes. Captain Moss, the senior instructor, stood frozen, his clipboard on the floor. And then, from somewhere in the crowd, a single pair of hands started clapping. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applause thundering through the hall like a storm. But for James and Aiden, there was no sound, just the two of them, just a father and a son who had found each other again. The mission was over, the noise was fading. But for James Colton, the real question was just beginning. What do you do when the world suddenly remembers who you are? Admiral Hayes invited James onto the stage. He tried to refuse, but Aiden took his hand and pulled him forward. They climbed the steps together. The Admiral handed James the trident. It was small, gold, sharp. "The honor is yours, Master Chief." James looked down at the pin in his palm. He looked at his son, standing tall in his dress whites, and then with hands that had destroyed enemy strongholds and saved dying men, he carefully, gently, pinned the trident over Aiden's heart. "I wasn't there for a lot of things," James said quietly, his voice barely audible. "But I'm so proud of who you became." Aiden's voice broke. "You were always there, Dad. You taught me what it means to be a SEAL before I ever enlisted." The ceremony continued, but no one remembered the rest. All they remembered was the image of a father and son standing side by side on that stage, one in rags, one in dress whites, both warriors. After the ceremony, Admiral Hayes pulled James aside. She was no longer the composed officer. She was shaken, angry, ashamed. "Master Chief, how long have you been on the streets?" "6 years, Mum." "And the VA?" "They tried. I fell through the cracks." Her jaw tightened. "That ends today. You hear me? I'm personally assigning a liaison to your case. Housing, medical, full psychological support. You're going to get everything you were owed and then some. James shook his head. I don't need charity, Admiral. It's not charity, it's a debt. And it's long overdue. Captain Moss approached next. He extended his hand. Master Chief, I'd heard the stories. I thought they were exaggerated. They probably were. I doubt that. Moss paused. We could use someone like you here. Not in combat, but as a mentor, a consultant. These kids need to learn from someone who lived it, someone real. If you're interested. James glanced at Aiden, who nodded eagerly. I'll think about it. That night, Aiden brought his father to his small apartment off base. It wasn't much. One bedroom, a couch, a kitchen the size of a closet. But it was warm, it was clean, and it was home. James stood in the doorway, hesitant. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. You're my dad, and you're staying here until we figure things out. End of discussion. They sat on the couch. Aiden made coffee. James held the mug in both hands, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. They talked for hours, about Marcus, about the nightmares, about the years Aiden spent wondering if his father was alive or dead, about the guilt that had eaten James alive. I thought I was protecting you, James said. I thought if I left, you wouldn't have to see me like that, broken, angry. I would have rather seen you broken than not at all. James nodded slowly. I know that now. We'll get through this, Dad. Together. For the first time in 6 years, James allowed himself to believe that might be true. 2 weeks later, James moved into temporary veteran housing on base. It was a small room, a bed, a desk, a window that looked out over the ocean. He started attending therapy 3 times a week. The nightmares didn't stop, but they got quieter. The guilt didn't vanish, but it became something he could carry instead of something that crushed him. He took the consulting job. Twice a week he'd sit with SEAL candidates and talk. Not about glory, not about heroism, but about the cost, about what it takes to come back from the edge, about what happens when the war doesn't end just because you come home. The young SEALs listened, and they respected him, not because he was a legend, but because he was real. Aiden visited every weekend. They'd walk along the beach, watch the sun set over the Pacific. They didn't always talk. Sometimes silence was enough. But slowly, piece by piece, they rebuilt what had been broken. One evening, as they stood on the shore, Aiden asked the question he'd been holding for years. Dad, do you regret it? Any of it? James was quiet for a long time. The waves crashed, the gulls cried, the wind tugged at his jacket. I regret the years I lost with you, but the rest? No. I did what I was trained to do. I saved the men I could. I lost the ones I couldn't. That's the job. And now? James looked at his son. At the trident pinned over his heart. At the man he'd become. Now I get a second chance. Not many people get that. Aiden smiled. No, they don't. 6 months later, James stood in front of a small group of SEAL instructors and candidates. He didn't wear a uniform, just jeans and a flannel shirt, but on his forearm the coordinates and the trident were visible, a reminder. Most of you know who I am, he began. Some of you know the stories, and yeah, some of them are true. But I'm not here to talk about the missions. I'm here to talk about what happens after, because the fight doesn't end when you come home. And if you don't have people around you, if you don't ask for help, if you think you can carry it all alone, you'll end up like I did, under a bridge, forgotten, and you're worth more than that, every single one of you. The room was silent. One young candidate, barely 22, raised his hand. Master Chief, how do you come back from that? How do you survive it? James smiled faintly. You don't survive it alone. You find one person, one reason. For me, it was my son. Find yours. And hold on. The class ended. The candidates filed out. But several of them stopped to shake James's hand, to thank him, to tell him they'd remember. And James realized something. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. He was helping. He was home. That night, he sat on the beach with Aiden one more time. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The ocean stretched out endlessly, dark and infinite. You doing okay, Dad? Aiden asked. James nodded. Yeah, I think I am. Good, because I need you around. You know that, right? I know. They sat in silence. Father and son, seal and seal. Two men who had walked through fire and found their way back. James Colton never made headlines, never gave interviews, never sought recognition. He still carried the photo of Marcus Reed, still carried the guilt, but he also carried something new. Hope, purpose, a reason to keep going. And sometimes, late at night, when the nightmares came, he'd open his eyes and remember where he was. Not under a bridge, not alone, but in a room with a bed and a window, with a son who loved him, with a second chance he never thought he'd get. The only easy day was yesterday, but today was worth fighting for. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that second chances are possible, that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places, please subscribe to our channel. And right now, on your screen, you'll see another incredible story waiting for you. Click it, watch it. And remember, every person you pass on the street has a story. Some of them might just be legendary. Thank you for watching.